So, having discovered the onset of baseball in Ross and Cromarty in World War II, we thought it was appropriate that we should then dig a little bit deeper and find out if there was any baseball in Ross and Cromarty in World War One. A fairly obvious thing to go and search for of any records of play during the Great War. Just as a bit of background, Ross and Cromarty, I think would be the second most northerly county in mainland Great Britain. Caithness and Sutherland is beyond that. So we're right up there in the far north of Scotland. The first note I had was in April 1914. Two Mormon missionaries, oddly enough, were in Inverness. They'd been in the Highlands for a couple of months. The paper said they'd still not taken their departures. It sounds like they might not have got a full Highland hospitality welcome. And they also, it was believed, they had no converts. But they spent their day knocking door to door to seek converts, and in the evening practiced the great American game of baseball at Victoria Park in Dingwall. And it was noted that there were no mean exponents of the game. Of course, Victoria Park would have been somewhat different. In fact, that'd be Victoria Park in Inverness. And that would have been different from the Victoria Park, which we know in Dingwall today, albeit that is now known as the Global Energy Stadium. So I didn't really find anything else in the papers referencing the game over the next 3 years as the Great War tragically took hold. Then on Saturday, the 11th of August, 1917, there was to be a baseball competition between Americans and Canadians at the Allness Gala. Allness, just a little bit north of Dingwall, the county town. Baseball in the papers was touted as essentially an American sport which takes the place of football in that country. Quite interesting, reflecting on those comments as we record this during the World Cup. So it would be a favourable opportunity to witness this American sport played by Americans and, of course, Canadians as well. The 3rd Seaforths, the local military regiment, are also going to put a display on at the gala, which, interestingly, was going to include bayonet fighting. And special trains were going to run north and south at the close of the gala, as the Americans might call it, to get everyone home. Rear Admiral Pierce was going to open the gala at 2:30 p.m. and Sir Hector Munro was to present the prizes during the gala. Most of the sports winners, unsurprisingly, were army men or teams of army men. Maybe that's unfair saying surprisingly. The opponents were locals, but also the Navy. Whilst there was a full analysis of the tug-of-war results in the paper, unsurprisingly, there was no note of the baseball score. This gala was organised by the Seaforths in aid of the Seaforths Broken in War appeal. I'm unsure what broken means in this context in 1917, but suspect it primarily refers to injured, and one can imagine these would be seriously injured people. It was held at Dalmore Park. Some of you listening might be familiar with Dalmore as the local whiskey of the area. It was held in heavy rainfall and raised in 1917 the amazing sum of £450. The teams were composed of men not dissimilar to World War II baseball from the timber felling camp at Ardgay. In early 1918, the Ardgay notes in the paper we're reporting that Mr. Jones of the local YMCA hoped to form a New England Lumbersman baseball team in the summer. That is just a fantastic name for a baseball team, and perhaps the Red Sox could have considered something like that. Whether there's a minor league team of that name, I would need to go and have a look. It was then reported on the last Sunday in April, an exciting baseball game took place on the Sabbath in the vicinity of Allness. Given the reference to the Sabbath, I'm unsure if this was written with genuine excitement or disappointment. The Highlands of Scotland would have had a certain attitude towards games being played on the Sabbath. Saturday, 4th of May, and US sailors from Allness travelled to play the said Ardgay Lumbersmen near the YMCA hut at Strathcarron and recorded a 7-1 victory. One of the few scores that we actually see recorded for baseball of that era in the Northern Highlands. In June 1918, it was reported that baseball was in great vogue at Castle Loud in Strathpeffer. Castle Loud will still be known to locals, obviously. The American Naval Red Cross men were experts in the game, and the ordinary ratings kept their hand and eye in when on leave. An exhibition of ball catching on the railway station was not an unusual spectacle. Castle Loud is, of course, the seat of the Mackenzie clan. For those interested in Scottish tradition and history, the clans will have their own head seat, and is also currently home of the town's shinty team, Caberfay. Anyone who's not a local and wishes to spell that for us, that would be an interesting one for you. And daily games of baseball at the castle between the Americans had become the norm. Later in June the same year, at the Red Cross Fete in Invergordon, a baseball game took place between the local American servicemen and a team from another base in the area. Victory was achieved by the Invergordon team. And at the start of July, heading out of Ross and Cromarty into the Inverness region across the Firth at Fort George being the major military base, in an event organised to support the Seaforth Prisoners of War appeal. A baseball game took place between the American Navy and Canadian servicemen. The first pitch was at 2:30 p.m. and boats would call it Fort Rose Pier, with free passage for folk from the Black Isle looking to cross the Firth and attend. Admission, which also included the obligatory tug-of-war match, was £1 at half price for any service folk and children. The media reported this, or the local paper reported this, as all of us can help a little bit to help the lads who have done their biggest bit for all of us. The US Navy men triumphed in the ballgame, and all sports at this particular fete gala were admirably and genially conducted. Later in July, Saturday the 27th of July, again for £1, the folk in Invergordon, back in Ross and Cromarty, could watch a baseball game starting at 6 p.m. between the US Base Hospital and the US Navy. A full range of more traditional, certainly to us local Highlanders, sports also took place. The Invergordon Carnival game took place on the parade ground, and as with many other events, this was also for the Seaforth Prisoners of War Fund, and a handsome sum of £600 was raised. Also in July, another game was hosted at the said Castle Loud Park between the number 2 Medical Naval Base and a naval unit, who were the victors. The cheering at the game was a revelation to the locals and outdistanced anything noted in the north, even the liveliest of football games. A naval band also provided entertainment. In early August at the Cameron Barracks, there would be a baseball game in aid of the Cameron Prisoners of War Fund. Not entirely sure, but I think the Cameron Barracks would have been at Fort George as well. Sticking with the Castle Loud area, it was noted in August that the golf course at Ulladale, Ulladale, now I hadn't heard of this before, but that's now known as Strathpeffer Spa Golf Club due to the area that was in Ulladale. It was getting busy again thanks to American Naval Medical Unit, who split their time off their military duties and medical duties between golf and baseball. Although having played the course a few times, one suspects baseball on that undulating golf course might not have been the best idea. A Seaforth Prisoners of War Fund event was held in the middle of August, and it was hoped that a baseball game would be arranged. Captain Finlayson, OBE, was in charge of the programme in Dingwall. It was noted that baseball was not a new game to the town, having been popular in the 1870s. Yes, that's something else I need to go and look into, although I've not yet found anything, but it would be an odd one just to be saying 40, 50 years later that had happened. Mr. Gibson, the then secretary of the Dingwall Baseball Club, yes, there appears to have been one. The local papers made the bold suggestion it may have been the only club in the country at that point in the 1870s. Well, anyway, he had returned to the town following his retirement from business, and he was involved in this. Mr. Brocci, a nephew of the late James Keith, bookseller, had introduced the town to the game. Dingwall had never seen a game with Americans, hence the desire for this particular spectacle. Indeed, the various peculiar shouts and cheering would in itself hold much interest to the locals, beyond, of course, just the simple game. The game would take place at the Jubilee Park, and the exhibition was due to start at 6 p.m. The Thursday event was expected to attract a record gate, and indeed over 2,500 people attended the event, with almost £500 raised for the POW fund. You can really see the interest of the event and the attraction of having events at such difficult times for the locals and, of course, for the whole country. The US Navy men took part in the exhibition baseball game, which the locals were delighted to see. Now, the brawny Seaforth Highlanders, military men, did defeat the US Navy in the tug of war, but the Navy men took their defeat well, cheering the victor. The baseball game was witnessed critically by all the attendees who enjoyed the spectacle. It was noted that baseball had been compared to rounders, but it was clear that baseball required more skill than the Scottish game, rounders being noted as the Scottish game. The comment made was, "It is rounders scientifically developed." So for anyone who disparages baseball, that's quite a useful comment. You need an eye like a hawk or an eagle. The brain must be alive and the limbs agile to the last ounce. Apart from the Americans present, it was likely no one knew who had actually won. And in fact, the reporter didn't care to say so either. But those who followed the game came away with a most favourable impression and a desire to know more about the game. Still moving into October, now a traditional playoff season, but perhaps the US weather would be more accommodating. There was a YMCA Hut Week between the 16th and 26th in Invergordon, which would include baseball games. We then head into 1919, and fortunately, as the war drew to an end, fortunately the war drawing to an end, but there was little to no mention of baseball in Ross and Cromarty in the papers. Indeed, in August 1919, at a meeting in Invergordon, the locals asked if baseball would be played on the naval fields this season. This was just a month after the Invergordon Social Club had taken a day out by train to Dingwall, rambled over Bran, where they had an enjoyable day, doing all the outbound activities they could, and indeed closed their day off with a game of baseball. And that closes this historical podcast from the Highland Bullpen Baseball podcast. Great to have something specifically on baseball in our home patch up in the Highlands. We hope you've found it of interest. We might be back with some stuff from the 1870s if we can find out a little bit more about that. Who knows? Thanks for listening.